Good morning, 3rd through 5th grade. All right, before we get started on your individual lessons, we're going to do some multiplication and division practice. I'm trusting that you're doing multiplication and division and fraction, etc. practice on Mondays, on Math Practice Monday. But just in case you need a little bit extra practice, I have some cards here to try to beat you with. Okay, I mean, I'm going to try to get the answers before you do. All right, so we have our multiplication cards that we're going to do first. Aw, where are they? They're from Benny's. Do you guys remember Benny's? Benny's is my favorite store. All right, and Dollar Tree. So, actually, Target. I can't wait to go back to Target. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the cards with you, and I want you to try to beat me. I'm going to give you a few seconds to get the answer, and then I'm going to say the answer. And if you get the answer first, you win. If I get the answer first, I win. All right. So let's start with, not this one. On your mark, get set, go. 27, 72, 144, 18. Oops, I said it too fast. 18. 22. 0. 50. 6. 40. 0. 45. 72. 35. 36. 100. 32. 4. 81. 5. 12. 0. 40. 55. 33. 0. 90. 7. 25. 16. 2. 108. 120. 20. 30. 18. All right. Now let's do some division. How do you do? Did you beat me at all? All right. We're going to do some division. You can find multiplication and division cards at the dollar store. You can do practice online. All right, so these division cards are using this division symbol. So remember, we're dividing the dividend by the divisor to get the quotient. So this would be 5 divided by 1 is 5. I think you already knew that. Okay. 9, 8, 7. Think I'm seeing a pattern. 4, 3, 0, 3, 2, 5, 6, 4, 4, 9, 8, 5, 7, 5, 7, 3, 6, 7, 4, 5, 3, 9, 6, 1, 2, 8, 2, 9, 10, 2, 8, 5, and 6. All right, let's turn them around and see if you can get a little bit faster. 7, 9, 4, 3, 3, 5, 2, 3, 4, 7, 4, 6, 6, 5, 2, 9, 4, 8, 8, 1, 10, 3, 2, 7, 7, 9, 8, 5, 6, 8, 2, 5, 6, 9, 4, 10. All right, who would have won around the world, me or you? Hopefully you. All right, so I hope you are making sure that you're staying up on your practice. It's so important to know your multiplication and division tables. It'll help you in fractions, obviously in multiplication and division, and most other forms of math. So make sure you are practicing. All right, 5th grade. So I hope that you are understanding least common denominators, because we're going to put them in use today for adding mixed numbers. All right, we're going to jump right in, and on page 476, we're going to look at the top of 476. It says, how is adding mixed numbers like adding fractions and whole numbers? Okay, so we kind of touched on this last time, that when you're adding and subtracting mixed numbers, you're going to focus on the fractions. Or when you're adding mixed numbers, you're going to focus on the fractions first, and then the whole numbers, and then putting them together. Okay, so let's do this problem together. Trail mix provides a high energy food for activities like camping and hiking. Luke used the recipe at the right to make the trail mix. 1 3/4 pounds dried banana, 1 3/8 pounds raisins, 1 1/2 pound mixed nuts, 1 1/2 pound dried pineapples, 1 5/8 pounds peanuts, 3/4 pound sunflower seeds. So let's look at the example. It says, how many pounds of dried bananas and raisins did Luke use? Okay, so we need to add 1 3/4 pounds together and 1 3/8 pounds together. Okay, but what have we said all along when it comes to adding or subtracting mixed numbers or fractions? They have to have the same denominator. So in order to find the same denominator, we need to find the least common denominator. Okay, well, with 4 and 8, I can tell just by looking at it, the least common denominator is going to be 8. And that does happen a lot of the time, okay? And it will even come out right if you just use the larger denominator and multiply it by the other denominator and do the same thing flipped, but that won't always be the least common denominator. So in this instance, for the least common denominator, it's going to be 8, because 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 1 is 8, okay? So we're gonna keep this one the same, okay? Because this is already the least common denominator. So let's move 1 3/8 to here. Okay, so now we have to turn 3/4 into 8s. So how do we do that without changing the value of the fraction? You always have to do the same thing to the top that you did to the bottom. And that is the only way that it's going to be an equivalent fraction. Okay, so let's move the 1 over here, and we're going to put the denominator as 8, okay? So what do I do to 4 to get 8? Multiply it by 2. So I'm going to do the same thing with the 3. 3 times 2 is 6. So now we can add these together. 1 6/8 plus 1 3/8. Okay, so remember, we add the fractions first. 6/8 plus 3/8 is 9/8. Okay, let's turn that into a proper fraction, a proper number, mixed number. So 9 divided by 8 is 1 and 1 left over. So we have 1 and 1/8. Okay, so now we have 1 and 1/8. Now we add the whole numbers together, which makes 2. So now we need to put the whole number and the fraction answer together. So 2 and 1 and 1/8 is 3 and 1/8. Okay, in this instance, we're not going to have to reduce the fraction because that's as small as it can get. So 1 3/4 plus 1 3/8 is 3 1/8. Okay, so total he has 3 1/8 dried bananas and raisins. Okay, so we need to find the least common denominator, make sure that the two denominators are the same, add the fractions together, add the whole numbers together, put them together, reduce if you need to. Okay, so for your homework tonight on that, you're going to do 477A odd. I'm only going to have you do A just in case you run into any trouble finding the least common denominator. Okay, and then for tomorrow, remember I fixed it. You actually have 479 and 80A odd because A moves onto the back on page 480. See, practice A, and then it finishes on the top of 480. Okay, so this is subtracting mixed numbers. Subtracting mixed numbers is a little bit more difficult because remember the top has to be larger than the bottom. They both have to have the same denominator, but the top has to be larger than the bottom. So sometimes you're going to need to borrow from the whole number. Okay, remember when you borrow from the whole number, you just borrow 1, and that is the denominator and the numerator have to be the same. Okay, so the first thing we need to do when we're finding we're subtracting mixed numbers is have a common denominator in the top number and the bottom number, okay? And then we'll do everything else. So let's figure this out. So we have, it says, how do you subtract, we're on page 478, how do you subtract a mixed number from a mixed number? Sheila collects butterflies and moths. She measured 2 wingspans shown below. What is the difference between the wingspan measurements? We have 3 3/4 inch and 1 7/8 inch. Okay, so we have 3 3/4 and 1 7/8. Okay, so we already used quarters and eighths in the last problem, so we know that the greatest common denominator, or the, least common denominator is 8. Okay, so we're going to turn 3, 1 7/8 is going to stay the same, and then 3 3/4 is going to be 3 6/8. Okay, so right here we can see that you cannot take 7 from 6, so we're going to have to borrow from the 3. All right, so we're going to give 6/8, we're going to give it 8/8. Okay, so we're going to turn the 3 into a 2 and give 8/8 to the 6. So now it turns into 14/8. This is going to look messy because I used marker. Okay, so now we have 2 14/8 minus 1 7/8. Okay, now let's subtract the fraction. Okay, so 14/8 minus 7/8 is 7/8. Okay, and that's as small as it can be. And then 2 minus 1 is 1. So the answer is 1 7/8. Okay, the difference between the wingspan is 1 7/8 inches. Okay, so there are a few steps, but you do the same thing every time. You first make sure that the fractions have the same denominator. If they don't, find the least common denominator of the two of them. Make sure that you multiply, or that you do the same thing to the top that you do to the bottom in order to make it equivalent. And then if the top fraction is larger than the bottom fraction, or smaller than the bottom fraction, you have to borrow from the whole number. And remember, every fraction that has the same number on the top as the bottom equals 1. So you're going to borrow 1 from it. Then subtract the fractions, subtract the whole numbers, make sure that it's the smallest that it could possibly be. And then you got